Hello and welcome to Unstressed. My name is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Now, before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I am recording this podcast, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and recognise their continuing connection to the land, waters and culture. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Now, today's topic is touching on refugees. And refugees, well, one could argue that if you are not a full-blooded Australian Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, then a component, one part of you at least, and for many it's a much bigger component, is an immigrant or a refugee or both. So this is something that, depending on which part of the last 200 years or so your ancestors have arrived in Australia, is something that has touched us all. My guests today are Anna Hohenboken from One Step Walks and Raeanne Sabira from MECA. Now, One Step Walks began in 2016 as a not-for-profit organisation to build mutual understanding between locals and people with the refugee experience through the simple act of connecting. And boy, have we learnt how important in this last year connections are, physical connections. And in this case, it's walking together and at the end of the walk, sharing a very casual and simple nosh, or we could call it a picnic as well. Now, Raeanne's involvement with MECA, which is the Mount Druitt Ethnic Communities Agency, MECA, is an independent community-based organisation dedicating to informing, linking and empowering people from culturally diverse backgrounds to enhance a culturally rich and diverse Australia. There are many challenges that new migrants and refugees face as they arrive in Australia, and language and isolation are just probably the big ones. So it was an opportunity for me. I became aware of One Step Walks about a year and a half ago. No, actually more like 2 or so years ago. We started in 2019. 2020, of course, is a complete blur to most of us, but it did happen. But we started with One Step Walks in 2019 and have been on several of their walks, and it has been a really interesting experience for me and my family, who have had the opportunity to connect with refugees in a way that I wouldn't ordinarily do, and realise some of the challenges they face and actually some of the similarities and the differences that do exist. So it's a wonderful way of connecting. And I'll have information about that. We talk about that in this podcast. Look, I hope you enjoy this conversation I had with Anna Hohenboken and Raeanne Sabira. Welcome to the show, Anna and Raeanne.
Hi, Ron. Thank you for having us.
Hi, Ron. Thank you.
Look, it's a pleasure. Look, we met a few weeks, or about a month or two ago, on one of the One Step Walks, and it's such a great initiative. I wondered, I will often start with my guests by asking them a little bit what brought them to this point, their own journey, professionally, personally. I wondered if if you'd be happy to share, tell us your own story there. Anna, maybe we start with you.
Yeah, sure. Well, I was traveling along very happily in a fabulous corporate career doing brand management overseas. And I kind of got to a stage where I realized, hang on, there's something missing for me. I wanted something a bit more meaningful, a bit more soulful. I've always been interested in human rights in general. I've been an Amnesty International supporter forever, and when it kind of dawned on me that I could make a career in that world, I got very interested. So I retrained, and I've since got my master's in human rights, and I've now worked in the realm of refugee rights, women's rights, and child rights more specifically, and also in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander rights as well. And then I had the great joy and privilege of becoming a mother to twins, which is fascinating. And then I got involved in health rights. But in the midst of all this, I think where I came to is I was really looking for a community, a grassroots organisation that I could work with, that I could give my heart and soul to, and make a real difference on the ground. And I came across One Step Walks, and the rest, as they say, is history. One Step Walks is this fabulous charity where really grassroots. We've only been going since 2016, and it's all about supporting refugees as they create their new lives here in Australia, insofar as connecting in with the Australian community and really building bridges between the two communities within our society to bridge any gaps and really support people as they create their new lives here. And we do that with this really simple magic called human connection. And it's lovely. It really is. We kind of bring people together on these lovely walks, a community walk and talk event. And we put people together in small groups and allow them to connect, to talk, to share, to laugh, to look at the scenery, whatever they like. And it's amazing what happens with that beautiful human connection. They come away from our walk saying, "Oh, it was so good to practice speaking English," and "Oh, I had no idea how resilient people had to be to live a refugee journey and come here to Australia," or just some really amazing, touching.
Yeah. Well, I know that on that last walk, I had the pleasure of walking with you, Raeanne, and I know you've been in Australia longer, but you were there with your sister who had arrived only recently. But I wondered if you might share with us a bit about your own journey and tell us the story.
If I start from back home, I studied bachelor in accounting, and I was working at the bank. Because of the war, we moved from Afghanistan to Pakistan 2 times. Once I moved to Pakistan as a migrant for about 3 years with my parents, brother and sisters, and went back to Afghanistan on 1991. And then the situation wasn't getting better. And that time I got married, and I left again with my new family, and I had my first child in Afghanistan. And I moved back to Pakistan. Mm-hmm. And I was living there for 7 years. Which wasn't really good. I went through a lot. But the way life took us, it wasn't easy. Then I came to Australia in 2002.
Right.
With my 3 kids.
And this was just after
great.
Yes, well, so this was just after the 9/11
yes.
thing, and that would have had a very dramatic impact, of course, was the beginning of a very long conflict in Afghanistan.
In Afghanistan, yeah.
You got out just before then? Well, no, 2001, just around that same time?
That was 2001. I went back to Afghanistan. Sorry, 2003. Right. 1993. Mm-hmm. And I got married on that year. Mm-hmm. And 1994, I went back to Pakistan.
Wow. And the whole environment at that time, I mean, you're moving backwards and forwards between Afghanistan, Pakistan. What was life like in Afghanistan for a young woman at that time?
It wasn't easy because the situation with politics has changed as well. The freedom with women, it's got a bit tight, and it was hard to live there. At the beginning, it wasn't that hard. We were just wearing a scarf, but later on, it was getting. When Taliban came, it got really bad because the girls should stay home, don't go to school, and all women stay home after when the Taliban was there.
Mm.
And my sister was working at the bank as well, the one you saw her.
Mm.
And my other sister was a teacher. They all stay home, and they were homeschooling their kids.
Mm.
All girls were stay home, and it was really hard for them. And on that time, I wasn't in Afghanistan.
Right.
On that time, I was in Pakistan, which was much easier for me. But being as a migrant in different country and leave your own country, it wasn't easy.
No.
It was
Twice.
Really twice, yeah.
Twice.
Yeah.
And coming to Australia, and we're going to talk about MECA and all the challenges of coming to Australia, but I just want to focus back on you were already in Australia when the Allied forces invaded or went into Afghanistan. You were already in Australia at that point.
Sorry, I didn't get that. What was the question?
Were you already in Australia when the American and Australian troops went into, the Allied forces went into Afghanistan? Were you in Australia or in Afghanistan at the time?
Which year was that?
I think it was 2003 or
2003, I was in Australia.
Yeah.
I came to Australia in 2002.
Yeah. And did you view that incursion, the fact that all these Allied forces went into Afghanistan, was that a positive thing? Was that a good thing? Did you feel it was going to get rid of the Taliban?
At some point, I don't know. I don't like to go to politics, but anyway, Afghan people from years, they don't want anyone to come to their country.
Yes.
And say, we will support you. We want to support you. They want to have their own freedom. But at the moment, it is a fight between tribes. And it is all, again, it is politics. They just fighting between each other. As a being Hazara, Pashtun, or Tajik, which is really sad.
It's a very volatile country. But now MECA, we've talked a little bit about what Anna has done, and we're going to come back to one-step walks in a moment, but you're also involved in MECA. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about MECA and what it's about, and what you're doing with this organisation?
MECA is around about 30 years.
Wow. In
Mount area, and we are supporting new arrivals, which is support them under 5 years with our settlement, and having some classes for them, and make them ready for citizenship class test as well. And anyway, they want to get support from us. We just connect them with different organizations and services.
And what are some of the challenges?
It is Mount Ethnic Communities Agency.
Right.
Yeah. And what are some of those challenges? I mean, when you came to Australia, when your sister has just recently arrived, what are some of the challenges that new migrants, refugees, in fact, face in Australia?
The big challenge is the language. As I experienced as well. I could understand them, but I couldn't speak the way everyone speaks because it's a bit different accent. And I learned an American way, and it was too hard for me to understand. But some people coming with no second language at all. They don't have English, and it is really hard for them to manage. And this one put them through a lot of stress. They're getting anxiety, they're getting depression, especially women, because they stay home and looking after the kids by their choice. I don't want to say it is men and men going to start working. And this is make them to learn English because they are out there and they're going out with friends. They want to spend time with people. But women get stuck in the house. And they're saying, okay, I want to get ready for kids to make dinner, make lunch, and look after them. This all the stuff make women to get behind, and they can't move that much in their society and their social life. which is not easy.
Mm.
And I imagine, particularly like yourself, with a professional career when you started, you were in the bank, you had an accounting, a Bachelor of Accounting, and you come to Australia. I mean, we're starting from the very beginning without language. I mean, really basic. And I guess also with the parents, with the husbands going off to work, learning English, and the children going off to school, learning English, it's very easy for a woman to be left behind there.
Yeah. Very easy. And I know some ladies, they are here over 20 years and they are not comfortable to talk with people. They're saying, oh, we can't speak very well because they lost the confidence and they have lost self-esteem. They think, oh, they can't speak with them. They speak wrong and there's not much support there to help them.
And is the support for One Step and MECA coming from government? Does it get any government support?
We are non-profit organization.
I'm not sure about MECA's funding. One Step Walks, we're completely funded by individual donors who generously give, as well as grants and trusts and foundations. So we are an independent organisation. And I think there is, talking about the sector in general, there is some funding available, but it's generally for the more kind of, I suppose if you think in Maslow's hierarchy, in those core needs at the bottom. So it's food aid, housing aid, financial assistance, assistance getting jobs, those that's where a lot of the funding from the government goes. And the sector is very stretched. There are a number of migrant resource centres like MECA around Australia, around Sydney, and they all do amazing jobs. And there's no such thing as a 9-to-5 when it comes to the people who work there. And Raeanne can attest to that. She probably won't, but I can on her behalf. And so what happens is these really critical well-being issues become completely unmet. And we have people who become isolated, and now, we've all had a taste of social isolation after the year of 2020 and coronavirus and lockdowns. And it's so obvious now, I suppose, to a much broader audience, just what happens when you do feel that isolation. So the funding that's received doesn't often go into these channels, and this is exactly how One Step came to be, because it was through community consultation that it was identified that the people who are within this community that are most vulnerable, they need help with practicing English, but practicing English with local speakers. Not people, who are learning themselves. That's also great, but it's with local speakers, and also just an opportunity to get out and to connect and let that, that magical human connection, which has such incredible healing power, again, which we've now all experienced. There's one thing meeting on a Zoom, and there's another thing to be in person, and it just makes a profound difference in our experience to people's well-being if they're facing these issues of isolation, social isolation, to bring them together in a beautiful location with people who are interested and want to get to know them and, willing to connect.
Yeah, no, it is a very interesting experience to go for a walk, and it's less confrontational, if you like, as you're both walking along and just chatting and hearing the stories. And I notice also you guys are doing there's a corporate walks program as well. How is that? Tell us how that's panning out.
Oh, well, it was brilliant up until coronavirus, because now, but basically this is, it's a really interesting concept that a lot of corporates are looking for opportunities to provide a meaningful experience to their staff. And whether that's a team building day or just, hey, here's an opportunity to get involved. But we partner with various corporates. We've partnered with the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, with Hotels Combined, with Arup. And we actually put on a walk specifically for an organisation's team members, their staff, and we partner with a migrant resource centre such as MECA, and we go for a lovely walk in the middle of the week. And it's the benefit of it is that the cost structure means that the corporate is able to financially back the walk. But it's also the beauty of it is that it's the two-way benefits kind of highway. So it's not just it's not a charitable act, so to speak. It's very much, hey, both his two communities coming together and equally learning and growing and gaining value. So yeah, it's beautiful.
And is the One Step Walk program, it cuts across the refugee community in general? It doesn't just target we've come into contact with a lot of Afghani refugees, a lot of from Pakistan as well, but it's across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I was looking at the current statistics. So globally, the refugee statistics are there's about 26.5 million refugees globally.
Wow.
As of mid-2020. So we'll see kind of what impact coronavirus has had on that in the coming months when the UNHCR put out their annual report. But of that, we know that 50% are children, and we also know that 2/3 of those people come from 5 countries.
Wow.
Which is just mind-blowing. So that's, we were talking about this before, it's Afghanistan, Syria, Venezuela, Myanmar, and South Sudan. So what we find is that the bulk of, I suppose, refugees that are resettling elsewhere are from those countries. But the way that our model works is we partner with the migrant resource centres that are happy to partner with us, and just whoever is in need of human connection, then come along. We're an open door.
Wow. I mean, it's kind of strikes me as an irony, really, in Australia that we aren't more welcoming of refugees than we are at the moment. How are you seeing the current mood, given that global issue and given what's happening in the pandemic? Are people closing up? Are they opening up? What are you seeing?
Well, it's really interesting for us when coronavirus hit, and it was all about social isolation, and the last thing anyone wanted to do was gather with 100 people and talk and walk. But we did a digital program. We kind of did a pivot and we went digital, and we had a really positive engagement. I think that there's a whole new understanding of social isolation and the impact that has, and also how important just simple acts can be. I think previously we talk about a walk and talk event, you really had to explain, the impact that human connection can make to well-being. But now everyone kind of gets it intuitively because of their lived experience in 2020. I think, people are still a little worried about coming together in larger groups. We're all COVID safe and all of that. We're registered with the New South Wales government, but, people still turn up with their face masks and, have a little distance around them and walk in smaller groups. But yeah, we're still seeing a really strong supporter base. If anything, I think people understand more than previously. Yeah.
Yes. No, we've been given a real lesson in what it means to be actually connected. And as you said that initially in your opening remarks, I thought, wow, we've all experienced that.
Yeah.
the interesting thing too, I think, about Australia is that if you are not a full-blooded Indigenous, Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, we are all refugees or immigrants. I mean, we've all had our time.
Yeah.
It's an interesting historical perspective for us to come to, isn't it? I mean, there's nobody you would meet. My background, your background, all of our backgrounds, not Indigenous.
Yeah, that's true. We were talking about that before.
Yeah, not 5 minutes before this call, we were talking exactly that. Yeah, and it's and I think it's interesting, and that's something that we've started building into our programs as well. Is acknowledging that and acknowledging that so many Australians are actually visitors to this land, and that First Nations people have been welcoming newcomers to their nations. We're a country of a land of many nations before colonialization, and there's a real opportunity for us to learn from the traditional owners. Well, how do you welcome someone to land, and how do you embrace newcomers? And there's a lot to learn. So we're starting to work with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander groups and organisations. We're about to launch our first reconciliation action plan, which we're thrilled about, because I think that's so it's such a timely reminder as people come together on this walk. It's like, oh yeah, we're all relatively new to this land.
Tell us a bit about that reconciliation action plan.
Yeah, so it's through Reconciliation Australia. They have a wonderful platform that kind of walk you through step by step as an organisation how to build a reconciliation action plan. But it's all about finding what role can we all play in our various places in society and business and culture to bring reconciliation authentically into our communities. And it's interesting because the feedback that we've had at One Step Walks from a number of our migrant resource centres is that, again, this is an area that a lot of people with refugee experience say, oh, I'd love to learn more about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander history and culture and tradition and language, but there's zero funding about this and very limited resources to do that. So we're in a position at One Step Walks to be able to start providing that initial experience of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture on our walks. And, it's something that we're quite excited about.
I mean, I remember when I was at school, we studied Australian history in the early parts of high school, but it started in 1770, really. Yeah. And I'm not sure whether it was that different when you went through. It was probably a few years after me, Anna. But we know so little about our Indigenous, the First Nations people. And given it was a country made up of 250 or so different nations, we just have so much to learn. It's incredible, isn't it? This is Yeah, and I think, it's also something that we were talking about before is, the idea of racism and making sure that we're an inclusive society and that we're combating these kind of otherist ideas when it comes to race is really important. It applies in so many areas across our society here in Australia and around the world. I think it's a really important message to talk about, whether we're talking about our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander acknowledgement and reconciliation, or whether it's newly arrived refugees, or whether it's migrants, or, whatever it is, that it's really important that we come together and we support and celebrate multiculturalism. Yes. Well, that was a big initiative, because I know when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s in Australia, having come from another country, I mean, I was born overseas. I was born in Israel. And when I arrived at 2 and I lived in Australia in the 50s, 60s and 70s, we didn't celebrate multiculturalism. I can tell you that. We all wanted to be Australians. And the less we mentioned our cultural background, that's where we wanted to be, and it was really only in the 80s and 90s with the Hawke-Keating initiatives and also with Whitlam. There's something about that political background there, isn't there? But anyway, that kind of celebrated this multicultural, ethnic background. It made our country so much richer for it.
Absolutely.
But you, Anna, you've, as you were telling me at the beginning of this conversation, all the things that you're getting into, you kind of have really lobbed into this at a very appropriate time. All of the things you're exploring are very current.
Yeah, absolutely. I know when I came across One Step Walks, it's almost like a love story. Let's face it. It just felt right. They felt right. I felt right, and it really was. It's amazing how sometimes just the right time and the right place and the right people come together. But it's been so exciting, and this is, I suppose, the silver lining of the lockdowns and everything is because we weren't, doing business as usual. We'd started doing these digital programs and we had a capacity to explore other things. And that's how we had the space to create the Reconciliation Action Plan and put that into practice and start, these broader conversations. So, it's, it was a bit of a surprise for us, but it was a very lovely little silver lining to the year that was.
Yes, and if people wanting to get involved with it and support it, how would we do that? How could they do that?
Join us on a walk. Absolutely. Come for a walk. We would love to have you. So you can, we've got 2 walks coming up. There's actually one on May the 30th. They're always on Sundays, May 30th, except for the corporate walks. So the best way to get involved is to actually go to our website, which is onestepwalks.org. And go to register your interest, and then your name will go onto our database, and we'll send you out an email with all the latest details about upcoming walks. So the walk that's coming up on the 30th of May will be at Balmoral Beach, actually. Mm-hmm. Because of COVID, you do need to register ahead of time, so you need to be very specific about that. But there's also going to be a walk on World Refugee Day, which is the 20th of June. We've actually got a partnership with the UNHCR for World Refugee Day, which is really exciting. So, that's a really exciting partnership for us.
What is that? What's going to happen there? What are you doing?
Yeah. Well, they basically love what we're doing and what we're up to, and they've said, we want to get behind you. There's no need for them to reinvent the wheel. So They're jumping on board with a one-step walk on 20th of June, and it's going to be a larger than normal walk. Still, the coronavirus restrictions are 200 people. Right. So we'll have 100 locals and 100 people with refugee experience all coming together at Pyramar Park. And, the UNHCR is going to, be involved and looking at getting some speakers for us and turn it into a bit of a do.
Yeah, it sounds good. Where is that? That's down in Pyrmont, is it?
Pyrmont, Pyramar Park in Pyrmont. So more details about that will be sent out to our email database as well. So you can find out about both of those by signing up on our website.
Mm. And around MECA, what MECA is assisting? How can people help at MECA as well?
We can help with food bank. We monthly helping community around the area once a month with food, and we have some budget for people going through crisis. We help them with their bills if they go through crisis as well, and we have classes for them to just relax and learn some English and have social life as well. And we have swim class for just ladies. It is just because mostly about women. We don't want them to isolate it. We have sewing classes for women once a week. We have swim class for women once a week. And we have citizenship class for everyone and English classes. We have computers. People can walk in and stay there for hours and use our computers, which is big help for especially new arrivals. And they're happy with that. And we're happy to help them.
Because when a refugee does arrive in Australia, your sister was an example, but she had family that were here. What is the typical experience of a refugee? They've left their country, they're on the plane, they land in Australia, they arrive at the airport. What happens to them typically at that point?
It is a bit hard for them because it is a new culture, new language, new country. Everything is like they are starting from beginning, leaving everything behind and coming in different country. It is not easy. I know they're coming to be safe and in better place, but it is not easy at the beginning. They're going through a lot of stress, and I experienced that in myself, which wasn't easy. I could speak English, but still, it wasn't easy for me to manage with everything. Helping people on that stage, it is actually a blessing. That's why I was thinking when I came, I said, okay, I want to change Korea. I want to help new arrivals. Yeah.
And is accommodation organised for them? How do they even start their first night of accommodation? Is that through organisations like MECA that help set that up, or are there other groups that do that?
Oh, this is happening through immigration, actually. If they're coming as a refugee, they all organized through immigration, and they have a support worker to help them with all the steps. How to go use public transport, how to get their healthcare card. They have to have a bank account. It is someone there to help, but it is all like really stressful. It's not easy to go through all this stuff. But it is better in countries like when we went to Pakistan. It was disaster because they're not accepting us. It wasn't easy to live there, especially for male. They had really hard life. They stopped them everywhere and they asked for money. Why you don't have ID card? At least in here, they are just coming as a refugee and they feel comfortable. They are an Australian. They're going to be here and this is their home.
Yes. Yes, I imagine culturally the change from, be it Afghanistan, Pakistan, or any of those other countries that you mentioned, Syria particularly. Gosh, I can only imagine what refugees from Syria are having to go through as well. The cultural shock must be quite dramatic in itself, apart from not being able to speak the language.
Yeah, it is. It is big shock because normally parents wants to keep the culture. And it makes it really hard for young people. They are new generation in here. And this is really hard for them to manage with two culture. And it's actually sometimes it is make them to come out from the pathway. It is normally to go take them in the right way. And it is make them to choose something to ruin their life. And this is just because of the culture, because of holding in their culture or holding on religion, which is in everywhere we have culture, we have religion. We have to just accept each other as a human. Any country we are living.
Well, I think that's a great note for us to finish on. And I want to thank you guys. And we're going to have links to the one-step walks as well as MECA. And let's look forward to catching up at that next walk. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Sounds wonderful. Can't wait to walk with you again, Ron.
Thanks, Ron.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
The issue of being an immigrant is a complex one. Most people leave their countries for very good reasons. They don't leave because life is so good where they were. They leave for a variety of reasons, and most of them revolve around the fact that hardships occur there, personally, culturally, religiously, on a health and safety aspect. There are so many reasons, but people leave countries to find a better life. And when they arrive, it's invariably they are very focused on making the best of that decision, and typically, I think, work very hard to become part of our society. And the next generation often are very hardworking, focused, studious people who are very motivated to improve their own lives and the lives of their families because of where they've come. And this has been the case in Australia for 250 years since we first arrived here in 1770, and since the first colony, 1788. It's been a process that has gone on continuously and in waves, be they British, be they Chinese, be they Southern European, be they from the Caucasus, be they from Mediterranean, from different parts of Africa or South America, you name it, wherever, Southeast Asia. There have been various waves of immigrants that have come, and the likelihood is that your own background fits into that, because unless, as I said, you are a full-blooded First Nations, Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, then you are an immigrant to this land, either part or in full. And I think that's a timely reminder for us. And I think we should be welcoming of that. And so these initiatives, I came in first contact with One Step Walks in 2019, and we went on a couple of walks with my family, and we met people from Afghanistan, and it was a very interesting, a very sobering experience to learn of their journey, to learn firsthand of some of the challenges which they have had experienced. And actually, if I went back into my own background, these would have been the challenges that my own parents would have experienced when they arrived in Australia, and we arrived in Australia in 1956. So we've all had our own story, and reconnecting with refugees in the way that One Step Walks does that in a very social, in a nice environment. We went on walks at Botanical Gardens. The next walk is in Balmoral, wherever it is. World Refugee Day coming up, and as you heard, that's going to be with the UNHRC, which is going to be co-partnering with One Step Walks. So we'll have links to all of those initiatives, and if you're wanting to dive in and join us on one of those walks, I'd really encourage you to do it. Look, it's a really interesting and heartwarming experience where you just get to connect with real people on a real journey through their lives. I hope you enjoyed that episode. Now, listen, don't forget to leave us a review. That's how we push up the ratings on a podcast. Don't forget to leave us a review, and we've got some exciting initiatives. We're going to be organising some live events, Q&As, which is going to be really an interesting experience for us. There's a whole new production team that has joined me on this journey in Unstress, and I'm really excited about where we're going to take the program into the coming weeks and months and years ahead. So I hope this finds you well. Until next time, this is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Be well. This podcast provides general information and discussion about medicine, health and related subjects. The content is not intended and should not be construed as medical advice or as a substitute for care by a qualified medical practitioner. If you or any other person has a medical concern, he or she should consult with an appropriately qualified medical practitioner. Guests who speak in this podcast express their own opinions, experiences and conclusions.